This revenge story contains intense acts of retribution that may be excessive and could be disturbing to some viewers.
I came home early that day, feeling like death warmed over. My head was pounding a relentless rhythm against my skull, each throb a fresh wave of agony. My stomach was a twisted knot of nausea, threatening to send the meager lunch I'd managed to choke down back up. I'd been putting in 12-hour shifts at the welding shop for weeks now, pushing myself past my limits. The flu had been circling like a vulture, and finally, it had landed. I felt like a truck had run me over, then backed up for good measure. All I wanted was my bed, the cool cotton sheets, and a week of oblivion. But the moment I stepped into the foyer, a cold, prickling sensation crawled up my spine, telling me something was wrong, terribly wrong. The first thing I noticed was the shoes. Not Rosita's usual array of stilettos or her practical flats. No, these were men's shoes, a pair of scuffed-up work boots, carelessly tossed next to Rosita's favorite pair of red heels. They looked worn, like they'd seen their share of concrete and dirt, a world away from the polished floors of my home. My stomach dropped like a stone in a well. The boots were a harsh, unwelcome presence. They didn't belong there. Then the sounds began, a wave of sound hitting me like a punch to the gut. The distinct echo of splashing water from the bathroom, followed by a burst of laughter, light and carefree. Rosita's laughter. It was a sound I hadn't heard in years. Not that genuine, unrestrained joy. It was usually strained. A polite chuckle at my jokes. Not this full, resonant sound. "The time we spend in the bathroom is the best," Rosita said, her voice floating through the door, light and almost giddy. The words themselves weren't particularly damning, but the way she said them, the tone, the context, it all formed a horrible, undeniable truth. It was like hearing someone else speak with her voice, a stranger wearing her skin. My chest tightened. The air seemed to thicken, pressing in on me, making it hard to breathe. I stood there, frozen, every muscle clenched tight, as if bracing for a physical blow. This can't be happening, I thought. Not Rosita. Not after everything we've been through. We'd built this life together, brick by brick, shared dreams and tears, faced every hardship side by side. I'd trusted her with everything. My mind was racing, images flashing through my head, each one more painful than the last. Her voice, so full of joy, the laughter that didn't include me. Then there was another voice, deep, unfamiliar, and far too comfortable in my home. It wasn't just the what that was gutting me. It was the how, the betrayal, the casual disregard for everything we had. I could feel the anger starting to bubble up, hot and sharp, like molten steel pouring into my veins. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even yell. Instead, a strange calmness settled over me, a cold, precise focus. My hands, still trembling slightly from the flu, found a weird steady now as I moved towards the bathroom door. I gripped the handle, my knuckles white. Then with a deliberate twist I locked the door from the outside. The small click of the lock felt like a death knell. I moved, not in a rush, but in a purposeful, measured way, back through the house towards the garage. I grabbed my welding gear, the weight of the torch familiar in my hands. The metal was cool to the touch, a comfort in its solidness. I always loved the work, the way you could bend metal to your will, shape it to your purpose. They never had to leave. I knew I was crossing a line, but in that moment, it felt like the only option, a twisted form of justice for the pain searing through me. The sparks flew, a shower of fiery droplets dancing in the dim light of the hallway. I adjusted my welding mask, the dark glass shielding my eyes from the intense glare, but not from the scene playing out behind the flimsy door. The torch in my hand felt heavy, solid, a strange sort of comfort in the chaos raging inside me. The sound of metal fusing together was deafening, the high-pitched whine a stark contrast to the muffled shouts coming from the bathroom. I worked methodically, each bead of weld a deliberate act, sealing the edges of the doorframe with a thick, unbreakable layer of steel. The welding was a physical process, demanding focus and precision. It was a welcome distraction, pushing the raw anger into a corner of my mind, turning it into a cold, calculated energy. I moved with a practiced ease, the years of experience showing in each smooth, controlled movement. Each spark was a tiny explosion, mirroring the chaos I was creating, the destruction I was enacting. This was me now, the methodical avenger, driven by betrayal and pain. The muffled shouting behind the door grew more frantic. "Morgan, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Rosita's voice was shrill, laced with a panic I had never heard before. It was a stark contrast to the carefree laughter from moments before. The sound tore through me, a sharp twist in my gut, but I pushed it down, clamping down on the compassion. I didn't want to feel, not yet. I needed to finish this, to make it irreversible. "Open the door, this isn't funny." Her voice cracked, a desperate plea, but my hands kept moving, the welding torch a weapon in my grasp. Each bead of weld sealed them in tighter, trapping them within the confines of their betrayal. I could hear Heath's voice now, deeper, more demanding, laced with a rising note of fear. "What the hell are you doing, man? Let us out, now." He sounded furious, entitled, as if he had a right to be there, to be demanding. This sense of entitlement inflamed my anger. I finished the last weld, the metal cooling with a soft hiss. The heat radiated off the door, a tangible testament to the barrier I had created. I removed my mask, the sudden change in light momentarily blinding me. I leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath, the metallic tang of the welding fumes filling my nostrils. The silence for a moment was deafening. Then their banging started, fists pounding on the metal door, weak and futile. The sound didn't frighten me. It didn't make me feel any better. It just was. My voice was cold, flat when I spoke. "If you love the bathroom so much," I said, my voice echoing in the hallway, "you can stay there forever." I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. The coldness of my delivery was far more terrifying than any shouting could have been. I could hear them, their frantic pleas, the sounds of them testing the door, trying to pry it open, but it was no use. I'd made sure of that. I walked back to the living room, my steps measured, deliberate. The house felt different now, colder, emptier. On the floor, near the coffee table, I spotted Heath's phone. It had fallen off the table in the chaos, the screen lighting up with a string of notifications. It was a sleek, expensive-looking model, just like Heath. I picked it up, my fingers brushing against the smooth, cool glass. It was a window into his life, the life he had brought into my house. I unlocked the phone, scrolling through his contacts until I found a name. Tara. I tapped the contact, hit call, and waited. On the second ring she answered, her voice sharp, impatient. "Heath? Where are you? You were supposed to be home an hour ago." There was an edge to her tone, a sense of frustration that was strangely satisfying. "This isn't Heath," I said, my voice steady, devoid of any emotion. "This is Morgan. I think you should come over. There's something you need to see." I hung up without waiting for a response. I knew she'd come. I could feel it. There was an understanding, an unspoken connection, a shared hurt that would draw her here. I placed the phone back down on the table, the screen still glowing with the message I'd left behind. The waiting had begun. Tara's arrival was anything but subtle. Her car, a black beast of a machine, screeched to a halt in front of my house, spitting gravel like a challenge. She didn't bother with the usual niceties. No tentative knock, just the aggressive slam of the car door, followed by the sharp click-clack of her heels on my walkway. When she stepped into the foyer, it was like a storm had just blown through, leaving a chill in its wake. Her face was a mask of tightly controlled fury, her eyes narrowed to slits, burning with a cold, hard fire that made my own simmering anger feel almost tepid. We faced each other like two gunslingers, neither willing to back down, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The air crackled with unspoken words, with the raw, palpable energy of two people brought together by a shared injustice. "So," she began, her voice low and sharp, each word a deliberate act of aggression, "you're the one who locked them in?" Her eyes bored into mine, demanding an answer. It wasn't a question. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown at my feet. I met her gaze, my own face devoid of any emotion. "Yeah," I said, my voice flat, as cold as the steel I'd worked with. I welded the door shut. They were in the bathroom, together. I gestured with a slight nod toward the hallway, the direction of the now silent steel-clad door. The faint scent of metal still lingered in the air, a grim reminder of my actions. She stared at me for a moment longer, as if assessing my worth, before finally turning her attention to the hallway. She walked toward the bathroom, her heels clicking with a deliberate rhythm, her fingers trailing across the welded seams. "Impressive work," she said, her voice laced with a cynical tone. "You a professional?" I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped my lips. "Professional what? Cuckolder? No, I work at the shop. I'm a welder." I used to think that could solve anything. My hand instinctively went to my side, as if the welding torch was still there, a tool of both destruction and creation. I guess I was wrong. She paused, her fingers still lingering on the cold metal, her eyes fixed on the seams. "So they were having a good time?" she asked, a hint of bitterness creeping into her voice, mirroring the rage that was still burning in my chest. I swallowed hard, forcing the images out of my mind. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat, laughing, splashing water like they were at the beach. The sound of it. I trailed off, unable to put the betrayal into words. Tara nodded slowly, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous intensity. He always did have a flair for theatrics. Never could do anything quietly. I caught him once before, a few months back. He promised it would never happen again. Said he loved me. What a damn lie. Her voice was low, almost conversational, but the anger was simmering just beneath the surface, like a volcano about to erupt. She turned to me then, her eyes narrowed, her gaze intense. "Did you ever get that from her? Did you think they loved you?" I looked away, my gaze fixed on the floor. I trailed off again, unable to form the words, the emotions too raw, too painful to express. I thought it was real. "I bet," Tara said, her voice laced with sarcasm. "They say the best liars believe their own lies." She shook her head slowly, a dark chuckle escaping her lips. "So what was your plan? Just leave them there?" I looked back at her, a mixture of anger and confusion swirling inside me. "I don't know," I said, my voice a low rumble. I didn't know what else to do." Tara smirked, a cruel twist of her lips. "Oh, I think we can do better than that," she said, her eyes glinting with a dangerous light. She pulled her phone from her pocket, her fingers flying across the screen. I'm going to call his job, tell them he's got the flu. Let him enjoy his little staycation. Her gaze flicked back to the bathroom, a predatory glint in her eyes. They can scream all they want. They're not going anywhere. She started to dial, and as I watched her, I felt something shift inside me, a sense of unease mixed with a strange sense of liberation. For 3 days, Tara stayed at my house, and the life we created became a grotesque parody of domesticity, a macabre ballet of shared pain and silent resentment. We existed in a space carved out by betrayal. The silence between us punctuated only by the increasingly desperate sounds coming from the bathroom. We'd wake up, make coffee in silence, the bitter taste mirroring the bitterness that had taken root in our hearts. We'd eat, staring at our plates, the food a mere formality, a fuel for our dark purpose. The days blurred into a slow, agonizing dance of unease and simmering anger, each one marked by the weakening cries and increasingly pathetic pleas. It was a bizarre choreography of shared pain, and somehow we were both determined to see it through. The sounds from behind the welded door had deteriorated into a pitiful mess. The initial shouts and curses had faded, replaced by desperate pleas, followed by the pathetic sobs and whimpers of two broken people. Rosita's voice was a thin, fragile thing now, barely audible at times, a desperate cry for help that was lost in the silence. "Morgan, please," she would whisper, her voice weak and trembling. "I'm so cold. Just let me out." Heath's bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by the whimpering of a man who had realized he was no longer in control. "Please, man, just let us out. I'll do anything. I promise I'll never go near her again." Their pleas were like a cruel symphony, a testament to the slow, agonizing breakdown of hope. "You think they're regretting it?" Tara asked one evening, her voice cutting through the silence like a shard of ice. She was sitting across from me on the couch, her gaze fixed on the flickering images of a movie that we weren't actually watching. She hadn't moved for hours, just staring into the screen, her face an unreadable mask. "I don't know," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Maybe." She turned to me, her eyes like chips of obsidian. "They should. They deserve every second of it. They broke us, and now they get to feel it." Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but it was filled with a cold, hard conviction that sent a shiver down my spine. They should be begging. "I keep thinking about what they're saying to each other in there," I admitted, the words tumbling out before I could stop myself. "Do you think they're blaming each other?" She smirked, a cruel twist of her lips. "Of course they are. They're probably trying to figure out how to betray each other to get out of there. That's what people like them do." She stood and started pacing the living room, her movements quick and agitated. They were never loyal, never honest. Now they're paying the price. Her words were almost a mantra, as if she were trying to convince herself that what we were doing was right. "Sometimes," I said, my voice barely audible, "I wonder if we're doing the right thing." The words hung in the air, a fragile whisper of doubt in the face of our shared resolve. Tara stopped pacing, her gaze meeting mine, her eyes glinting with a dangerous intensity. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice sharper now, a warning note creeping into her tone. I looked away, my gaze fixed on the floor, unable to meet her eyes. Sometimes I feel like maybe we're becoming something we're not. I didn't know what I was anymore. I was lost in this dark place, and she was the only person in the world I could rely on. I just didn't know if I could keep going forward with this. She walked over to me, her hand reaching out, her fingers gripping my chin, forcing me to look at her. "We're just taking back what was ours," she said, her voice low and intense. "They took everything from us, and now they have to pay. Don't tell me you're losing your nerve." She pulled away, her eyes searching mine. "We're in this together now, remember? And there's no going back." She looked back to the bathroom, listening closely. "Besides," she added with a slight smile, "I think we might finally get what we wanted." The tension in the room thickened, a silent promise hanging between us. The cries from the bathroom were becoming fainter, a distant, pathetic whimper that was almost drowned out by the heavy silence that had descended upon us. We both knew that something was about to break. That evening, as the house fell into darkness and the cries from the bathroom became a faint echo of their former selves, we found ourselves in my bedroom. The air was thick with unspoken desires, with a desperate longing for connection. We stood there for a moment, our eyes locked, our bodies trembling, a mixture of fear and anticipation surging through us. We had become something new, something darker, and we were about to step across a threshold, a point of no return. There was no turning back. We were in this together now. By the end of the week, the bathroom was silent. The heavy, oppressive silence hung in the air, a stark contrast to the desperate cries that had filled the house just days before. The silence was more terrifying than any sound, a stark reminder of the consequences of our actions. Tara and I stood outside the door, staring at the welded seams, the metal now dull and cold, no longer glowing with the fiery heat of creation, or rather, of its grotesque opposite. It was a monument to our shared act, a monument to betrayal and revenge. The silence from within was absolute and final. The house felt different now, heavy, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in on us. The air was stale, thick with a residue of fear and desperation, and the lingering smell of metal and something else, something indefinable, that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The silence was a weight pressing down on us, a tangible representation of the darkness that had consumed us. I knew in that moment that there was no going back, that we had crossed a line, a point of no return. "What now?" I asked, the question hanging in the air, a desperate plea for some kind of direction, some kind of way out of the maze we had created. My voice sounded hollow, distant, even to my own ears. I felt detached from myself, as if I were watching someone else's life unfold before my eyes, a life that was both terrifying and strangely compelling. I felt a pull toward the darkness, a pull toward the abyss, and I wasn't sure if I had the will or even the desire to resist it. Tara's eyes gleamed, her gaze fixed on the welded door, a flicker of something that was almost excitement dancing in their depths. "We don't need them," she said, her voice calm, her tone almost casual. It was as if she were discussing the weather, rather than the fact that we had just effectively imprisoned two people, leading to their demise. "You and I can start over. We can leave this behind. If this house burns down, you'll get the insurance money, and they'll disappear. 2 birds, 1 stone." Her words were like a cold blade sliding between my ribs, chilling me to the core. I hesitated for a moment, just a moment. A brief flicker of doubt, a whisper of conscience, tried to claw its way out of the darkness that had taken root within me. A part of me, a small, insignificant part, still remembered what it was like to be human, what it was like to feel compassion. I thought of Rosita, her laughter, her smile, the way she used to look at me. A lifetime ago. I thought of all the dreams we had shared, all the plans we had made. They were now ashes, nothing more than a painful memory of what could have been, a sharp reminder of what I had lost. I looked at Tara, her face an unreadable mask, her eyes unwavering, and I knew that the brief moment of hesitation had passed. I had made my choice, and I wasn't about to turn back now. I had crossed the Rubicon, and there was no turning back. I was now complicit in her cold, calculated plan. I had become something else. I turned, moved toward the living room, my steps heavy, deliberate. I found a photo of Rosita and me, the one from our wedding day, tucked away on a shelf. In the picture, we were smiling, our eyes filled with hope, our faces radiant with love. It felt like looking at strangers, a memory of a life that no longer existed, a painful reminder of everything that I had destroyed. I held the photo in my hand for a moment, the paper thin beneath my fingers. Then with a sigh, I took it off the frame, a grim final act of closure. I lit a match, the small flame flickering in the dim light, and held it to the edge of the photo. The paper caught fire, the flames licking hungrily at the edges, consuming the image of our past. The flames seemed to dance, to writhe with an almost malevolent glee, as if they were reveling in the destruction they were wreaking. I watched, transfixed, as the flames began to spread, turning the once vivid image into a smoldering mess. I dropped the burning photograph onto the curtains and watched as the fabric ignited, the flames quickly spreading, consuming everything in their path. Tara stood beside me, her hand finding mine, her fingers intertwining with mine, a silent confirmation of our bond, a perverse understanding that we were now partners in this act of destruction. The house filled with smoke, the acrid smell stinging my nostrils, bringing tears to my eyes. It was a smell of finality, of ending, of a past being burned away. We didn't speak, just stood there, hand in hand, watching the flames spread, watching the house we had once called home disappear in a sea of fire and smoke. The flames roared, filling the room with an orange light, consuming everything in their path. We were standing in the heart of the fire, and in some twisted way, it was all that mattered. We turned, walked out the front door together, leaving the past behind, leaving behind the remnants of a life that was no more. We walked into the cool night air, the flames licking at the windows behind us, painting the night sky a vivid orange. We didn't look back. The house was gone, and with it, the past. We had each other, and in that moment, that was all that mattered. We were free, finally, to start over, to build something new from the ashes of our former lives. I felt a strange mixture of relief and unease, a sense of liberation tinged with a lingering sense of dread. We had left the past behind, but the darkness we had embraced would always remain, a permanent stain on our souls.